Okay, well, let's move on to Euthyphro's definition. And we see towards the top of page 8, or in fact at the top, Socrates says, "Bear in mind that I did not bid you to tell me one or two of the many pious actions, but the form itself that makes all pious actions. For you agreed that all impious actions are impious, and all pious actions pious through one form." Or do you remember? One form, one definition. I do. Tell me then, what is the form itself? Tell me what this form itself is, so that I may look upon it and, using it as a model, say that any action of yours or another's that is of that kind is pious, and if it is not, that it is not. Euthyphro, if that's what you want, Socrates, that's how I will tell you. Socrates, that's what I want. Euthyphro, well then, what is dear to the gods is pious, what is not is impious. Socrates answers, splendid, Euthyphro. Okay, we get the definition. He says piety is what is dear, or what is loved by the gods. Now, in philosophy, we have a way of a shorthand way, or a way of writing down definitions like this. And here's the way we do it. With DP1, definition of piety 1 from Euthyphro, X is pious means, equals by definition is equal, DF period means in philosophy short for equals by definition, or means the same as X is loved by the gods. So Socrates is thrilled. We have an answer. Now, what's Socrates going to do? He's got to examine the answer to make sure it's a correct answer. So that's the thing that he will proceed to do. And what ends up happening, as usual, is always the case, Socrates has a refutation of Euthyphro's first definition. And that occurs, right below he starts in his cross-examination. And the cross-examination, or the refutation, is something that the scholars call elenchus. And it's the whole Socratic method of asking questions, digging into a definition, and basically what happens in one of these things is that, and that's the nature of this elenchus, is that Socrates gets his interlocutor, the guy he's talking to contradict himself. And here's the way it's going to work for this one. What he's going to do is get Euthyphro to see that according to this definition, the same things are both God-loved and God-hated. So you can't have things that are God-loved and God-hated. And he does that by going through and examining him about what the gods believe. He says, "Come then, let us examine what we mean. An action or a man dear to the gods is pious, but an action or a man hated by the gods is impious. They are not the same, but quite opposite, the pious and the impious. Is that not so, Euthyphro?" "It is indeed." I'm in the middle of page 8. Socrates, and that seems to be a good statement. Euthyphro, "I think so, Socrates." Socrates, "We have also stated that the gods are in a state of discord, that they are at odds with each other." Euthyphro, "and that they are at enmity with each other." They are fighting with each other. They're not friendly with each other. "Has that too been said?" Because after all, Euthyphro's the expert of gods. "It has." "What are the subjects of difference that cause hatred and anger? Let us look at it this way. And what does it end up that these are going to be? Right and wrong actions, pious and impious." Socrates is thinking of all of Homer's stories, the Iliad, the Odyssey, where the gods are at war with each other, deciding whose side they should take. And he says, well, what are the things that they fight about? What's the difference that would make us angry? He's not sure what makes gods angry. He says, Socrates goes on the top of page 9, what subject of difference would make us angry and hostile to each other if we were unable to come to a decision? Perhaps you do not have an answer ready, but examine, as I tell you, whether these subjects are the just and the unjust, the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the bad. Are these not the subjects of difference about which we are unable to come to a satisfactory decision, you and I, and other men become hostile to each other whenever we do? That is the difference, Socrates, about those subjects. Socrates says, what about the gods, Euthyphro? If indeed they have differences, will it not be about these same subjects? It must certainly be so, he answers. Euthyphro, that is, answers. Then according to your argument, my good Euthyphro, different gods consider different things to be just, beautiful, ugly, good, and bad, for they would not be at odds with one another unless they differed about these subjects, would they? Euthyphro says, you're right, Socrates, and they like what each of them considers beautiful, good, just, and hate the opposites. Well, you see where it's going. Some of the gods love certain things, and other gods hate them. So we have the same things are both God loved and God hated. There it is, a serious problem with this particular suggestion. Now what I want you to do as an exercise, I'm going to want you to go in and take a look at the argument and formulate the argument the way we are in class, just to get the form of the argument, see how it works, see that it's a good argument. And this is a very interesting form of argument that's being used, something known as reductio ad absurdum, which is a fancy Greek term for to reduce to absurdity. That is, you start out with a statement that you assume P for the reductio ad absurdum, and then what you do is show that from P and maybe some other assumptions, Q follows, and then from some other assumptions and P, not Q follows. Well, anything that leads you to a contradiction has to be false, therefore not P. In our case, the P is obviously the definition that Euthyphro provides. So now, as an exercise, take out a piece of paper and formulate this argument. And one thing I can tell you, we could spend a lot of time on it, but we're not going to. Take my word for it. This is a valid form of argument. That is, any argument that works this way, necessarily, if the premises are true, so is the conclusion. The conclusion follows from the premises. The logic is good. The only question is, to be asked when we have a valid argument is it sound? Sound is valid and it has true premises. So that's a question that we're going to ask in evaluating. But first, formulate the argument that Socrates has just given.